My name is Mo and I produce metal, and today we're gonna make some custom sound effects for our productions. Today I'm going to show you a few different kinds of sound effects that I'm using all the time in my productions, and the goal is that you can create your own sound effects using your own favorite sounds, and then you will have a folder of sound effects that you can just drag and drop into your productions. The first sound effects that I would like to show is what I like to call a auxiliary cymbal hit. This is pretty common in metal productions to really emphasize a new section of the song, adding on to the cymbal hits of the drums that are already there. So it sounds like this. Very straightforward. And all I'm doing here is that I'm using the One Kit Wonder Architects by Get Good Drums. And I'm hitting 3 different cymbals at once. Now this is a pre-processed kit, so the cymbals will already fit quite nicely into the mix. So it's just adding some extra sheen to the first cymbal hit of the section. All I've done here is I've just applied some soothing here to smooth out the sound a bit. You can then fade out the sound here at the end to avoid any clipping whatsoever in the sound, and you export the sound file. Then I've already loaded it in, but here's the finished sound file. So exactly the same, but since it's now a WAV file, I can just drop it into all of my mixes going forward and have this effect whenever I like it. The next effect I want to show you is slightly more complicated. It's a snare bomb. It's also a very common effect. I am using a few different sounds for this. Firstly, I am using the Pearl Vinnie Paul snare from Modern and Massive. Next, I have the copper snare from GGDP4. I then have some damage hits from Damage 2. Together, the point I want to make here is it doesn't matter what sounds you use as long as you pick stuff that you like the sound of. And then you can just get creative in the processing. What I'm doing here is that I'm starting with a lot of compression. I am boosting the transients a lot, and I'm saturating it. So it's getting way beefier immediately. Then I have some initial shaping EQ. Removing some of this gunky stuff down there that I don't like. Now it's a bit too pokey, but I'm then fixing this by using a clipper that is just shaving off the transient super nicely. Next, some reverb at 80%, but with some pre-delay, so this initial attack is still coming through, but yeah, getting this super long reverb tail. But I'm cutting off the sound here at the end because I don't want it to go too long and muddy up the mix later. Some more EQ after the reverb. So yeah, it's becoming way thinner, and then just some soothe to clean it up a bit. So together with the drums, here's what it sounds like. That's also exported, and here is the final result. The next effect that I want to show you is a impact hit, so it's this kind of effect. This is made up of 2 sounds, the first one being a kick sample. I don't remember exactly where I got this from, but yeah, you can use any kick sample. I just wanted a really deep kick for this impact. I'm also generally not a fan of this long bass drop that is just muddying up the sub areas. I prefer the sub hit to be super short, and then having like from 100 Hz and above, there can be a bit more sustain. If you don't have headphones or great sounding speakers, you won't be able to hear this because it's super low. But as you can see here, it's around like 40 Hz or something. But still there is some sustain to it, so I'm gonna kill that sustain using a transient designer before the EQ, just removing all the sustain, adding a tiny bit of attack. So you can hear it's just a blip of low end punch. So that's the low end part of my sound. The high end part is damage once again. And here I am using 3 different samples. It's this sound, and this sound. And I am just feeding these through an EQ where I'm removing everything under 100 Hertz, removing some low mids here and also some high end. I'm also leveling it a bit down. So yeah, like I said, I only want the low end punch from the sub kick. I am then feeding them through a bus, which I'm starting with some tape saturation. Fatting it up a bit and saturating it a ton. Then I'm using bass mint to remove some rumbliness. And here is also a lot up to taste. I don't want it to sound too harsh on the top end. I mainly want the low end punch. So this I've done together with the drums. And here's what it sounds like. So removing a lot of mids that I know I will need when I'm adding the guitars and everything in the mix. And finally, it's just soothed once again, keeping things under control. So that's where I am at the moment. What I then want to do is to make some variations of this impact. And here I'm going to use an explosion sample that sounds like this. So let's level this with the other stuff. Together now it sounds a bit more bombastic, exactly what I was after. And also I'm gonna let this one go for a bit longer than before to get a longer tail of it. Something like that maybe could be good. Okay. And then I'm gonna just export this one the same as before. So I'd want a third one, which is one that is a bit darker if I don't want this top end sound. So I'm just gonna mute the explosion one. I'm going to make it a lot darker here. And then I'm going to saturate it a ton to get a more distorted kind of sound. Okay, so let's see it together now. I need to make it a bit louder. Okay, so we have the 3 impacts. We have the dark one, we have the bright one, and we have the explosion one. So very, very similar in the low end because it's exactly the same sample, but the top end changes. So you can get some variation in the mix. If you use the same drop sample for the entire mix, it's gonna get a bit boring and repetitive. So just small variations like this can go a super long way. Okay, so there's only one more section of sound effects that I want to make, and that is some percussion. And then I have a modern pop sounding kit here. Let's see what kind of sounds we can get from this one. I want a 16th note loop, so I'm gonna do 4 bars, and then I'm gonna find the hi-hat sound. So here it is. Okay, something like that. And then I'm going to try to find a pretty short hi-hat sound. Okay, I think this one can be good. I'm gonna try to increase the compression and see how it sounds like. The limiter. Okay, sounding pretty cool. I'm gonna do this one on the left channel and then I'm gonna duplicate it to do another one on the right channel. And for that, I'm going to use a different sound to avoid phase cancellation. This sounds pretty cool. I'm gonna increase the text slightly to match the other one. I'm gonna just apply some soothe here to the top end. And then just some limiting. Let's see how that sounds. Are the two channels in sync with each other level-wise? Not quite. I want to make a different kind of percussion sound as well. So for that, I'm going to use Labs by Spitfire Audio. And by default, it's loaded into the percussion library. And it's the same principle, but this has a bit more of a natural sound to it. So it's not this electronic hi-hat sound that maybe sometimes you don't want. And another trick you can do to really get them sounding super, super wide is to just apply some imaging to them. Here I have a free imager by Isotope. And finally, I want a tambourine. So here I'm using Labs as well. Here it is. Okay, cool. Let's see level-wise what we're looking like. Pretty good. Now we have 3 different percussion sounds that can be very useful in a mix context. What I'm now going to do is that I'm going to change the tempo down here, starting at 100 BPM. I have my export zone here, and then I'm going to export all 3 of these at 100 BPM. So now I'm going to mark all of these. I'm going to export all 3, and then I'm going to name it here 100 BPM. And now, as you can see here in my render folder, I have 3 different percussion layers at 100 BPM. I am then going to change it to 110 BPM, and then I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to change it to 110 BPM. So I'm going to keep going all the way up to 190 BPM, and then we will have different tempoed shakers. Now, if your tempo doesn't match perfectly to one of these, you can take the one that is the closest and then just time stretch it. So now you can see I have a neatly ordered folder here with all of my new sound effects. I have the cymbal, the impacts, the snare bomb. I also made a reverse snare bomb. It's super easy to do. You just reverse the sound clip that you exported. And then I have the percussion here at all of the different tempos. So super simple to access whenever I need it. Now I'm going to show you just how easy these sound effects are to use in a mixing context. Are you enjoying the video so far? Then please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Here's a mix that I'm working on for Red Keep. It has some different sections that we can use the sound effects on. So when this first riff drops, I want to add some impact to it. So I'm going to add my cymbal effects here. Just this added sparkle on top. Then I'm going to add a bright impact. So I'm going to play you now without the effects first, and then I'm going to add them back in. Yeah, I like that sound. It's just adding some low-end heft without muddying up the sound at all. Next, we can add some percussion, and then I'm going to check here that the tempo is 160. So I'm going to go into the 160 folder. I want some electric percussion, maybe. So I feel like the sound of the electric percussion is a bit too aggressive, so I'm gonna go with the shakers instead. Then we can also add the snare bomb here just to have some fun. And here is a cool trick you can do. You can take the impact sample and you can copy it and you move just to this point here so we don't get the impact. Then, at least in Cubase, here's how you reverse a sample. You do audio, processes, reverse. but I know there is a drum fill before, so I want the fade in to stop before that comes in. Okay, cool. So together with everything, here's how it sounds. Now we're getting somewhere. So what I then like to do is to go to places that need some more impact, like the chorus, for instance, here. And I just like to copy in the cymbal, and then let's add a darker impact sample. So it's a different one from before. And next we have a drop here. So it's a really heavy riff. And I know that I want the heaviest impact sample here. So I want the explosion one. I hope you got something out of this video and will try to make some sound effects yourself. Till the next one, enjoy!